going to do it this time. You guys have 5 minutes to answer a question, either with a slide or a very short video, so only very short answer. And the question that I have for you is a very simple question, or it can be very complex, depending on how you look at it. I would like to know, what does the connected car mean to you? So just because of how the order that I introduced you, Marco, would you like to begin and answer the question, what does the connected car mean to you?
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the chance to be here. And before I start answering that question, let me share the regrets of Carolyn with you. She had her very personal travel experience yesterday. She spent from 3 in the afternoon till 12 in the night at the airport and in a plane waiting to take off before she finally got the message that they have to leave the plane, collect the luggage, and go home again. So talking about mobility experience, that is something I can already share with you. And she called me in the night, and luckily I already planned to be here. So unfortunately, I'm not Carolyn, but let me share our thoughts on mobility with you. Well, I was kind of surprised to see the title of this panel being Connected Cars. Because to be honest, I thought we are 1 step or 2 steps further in our discussions, and that relates to what we just heard from Darius. For me and for us, connecting cars is just one example of connecting carriers of mobility with users of mobility to create the best way of bringing goods or people from one place to another, while not only fulfilling their demands on mobility, but also serving the challenges of mobility, which mainly are urban logistics, urban transport at this point in time. So connecting cars is an enabler for things we hopefully talk about later on. Now, I know that Carolyn prepared 1 slide in the video, and I don't know, I think that might be a good time to introduce that as well at this. So if the regie could just put that video. 1 slide on.
Maybe you need this. I don't know.
Do we have to do that?
Did you use the clicker?
I don't know.
Oh, there we go.
So this will be the video. Would be better to have the... there. So if that gives you inspiration for the weekend, it's okay.
You can applaud. I mean, very sweet story.
Okay, so what does this tell? This tells that in future we have to transport lots of people and lots of goods, so it's mass transportation by giving everybody the feeling of an individual positive travel experience according to his requirements. So that is the major challenge we prepare for. And we do that, and I think now comes the slide thing, isn't it? And we had a lot of activities already going on for quite some years within Bosch. People here from the e-mobility community probably know our charging of us know people like Friedemann Bay, like Kai Weber, who's very active in that field. And there were some other activities, community-based parking, or things that relate deeply to the in-car knowledge of control units in the car and how to connect them. And beginning of this year, we combined that in a new division, which is a big thing for Bosch to do, to found a new division, which is called Bosch Connected Mobility Solutions. Because we think we are at the point where we need to really scale. And that would be one thing I would like to discuss with you here today as well. We talk about so many images of the future. But if we look on the streets, what we see is the mobility of yesterday. So we should also think about what we can do to definitely speed up, not only creating the next big image of the future, but really to take up speed in implementing this. So you can see the different units and fields of activity, but we already identified that doing connected businesses is not feasible by having, let's say, separated units. So this chart will look different in 1 or 2 years, and we already identified that we also need to work on our organizational structure. But we think as Bosch we are mature enough to challenge and face and tackle those future problems now with one strong organization that bundles all the offers we have. That much for an introduction. I hope we dig deeper.
Yep, perfect.
On.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very, very much. So, Michele, you can also answer the question, what does the connected car mean to you?
Well, I think that to me personally, it has been the focus of the last 10 years of work at McKinsey. And when I think about it, I see opportunities and challenges. We have conducted a lot of research on this specific topic, serving clients all over the world. And it's interesting, we recently completed a survey trying to understand what stands in the way of real data monetization, of generating value out of vehicle data and car data. And 3 elements came out. And then we're going to have a video that tells a bit the story of the first one. The first is the fact that oftentimes industry players involved don't start from actual consumer needs, but rather start from what they can do, what they want to do. So I loved, even in the previous speech, there was this mantra of start from solving an actual problem as opposed to trying to understand what you can do with the technology you have. We see this, and consumers talk a lot about it. So we're going to see shortly a video in which some of the consumers we interviewed, we run some clinics specifically on this topic. Across the world, we're going to see the results of clinics in the US with a short clip of how they feel about car connectivity and the connected world.
It's not so much important to be connected as I would be bored if I wasn't connected to something. So it's really just to keep off boredom. So when I'm like on the train or in transit, that's extra time that I don't have to do because I'm not the one driving.
Right.
So I'm using that time to do things that I would just do for fun.
Yeah, if you give me $100,000 to find a car, that any car I want, but I have to spend on a car, I'd go get the most technical, advanced car I could possibly get. And literally, I wouldn't care what it looked like. Like it for tech. People are afraid to go to the next step. They think it's too much work to learn. It's too much embarrassment if they don't get it. And I just feel I have enough background that I think I could go to the next step easily. And if I don't, I know where to find out how to do it.
In the car, the experience then can be basically tailored to whatever type of work you do, or something, whatever it is that you normally do in your commute to get to your place of work, you can enhance that in whatever way you seem fit.
My phone is a big help for me. I'm very connected to technology when it comes to my transportation. I don't think it's like safe, honestly, but for me, I feel like that's very dangerous. Once I'm driving somewhere, I already know where I'm going and I want to get there. Spontaneous advertisements like that telling me where to go is like weird. I always stream music while I drive. I cannot stand listening to the radio anymore.
Driving on freeways with my music on and with my windows down. I can drive like up to San Francisco even sometimes. And it helps me a lot. It helps me like more than any therapy could.
So essentially, this was a mixed basket of the many, many feedbacks we received. And really, the key point we learned out of those clinics is that everyone expects their life to be extended. So with connected cars and in the future with autonomous vehicles, they expect to be able to enjoy their time in a better way. And oftentimes we have the sense that companies tend more to focus on what they can generate value for themselves directly, as opposed to what would create value for the consumer. And this choice, this freedom of choice, is actually something that is very highly valued by customers.
All right, thank you very much. And now, Minh, what does connected car mean to you?
I have to say this on Xain's perspective, because we are a cybersecurity company who are working mainly on making sure that the user gets secured on the data, and the privacy is set it up, and everything is fine on this in terms. So when you're talking about connected vehicles, we see, of course, all the dangers around this, because suddenly you put a vehicle as a service hub connected to other devices with all the data transmissions, all the connectivity you need for the charging stations, all the transactions who are going to be automated, and all this data have to be secured. Authentication has to be right there, and there's a need, of course, of flexibility and of kind of standards. And when I see, we are just floating between hardware, software, and vehicles, between OEMs and others. They're all talking to us. We made several implementations, once with Bosch, which was quite successful. They validated it, and we're still working for them, and with other brands, automotive brands. And this is just part of it, because this is all related to logistics, like DHL, as you've seen, the delivery on the cars, and other things. And so yes, we see it really more on this perspective. And I just rolled back from yesterday. There was someone saying that for enabling the adaptation for this new way of consuming actually transportation, there was a need of trust, and this is really what is needed here, and this is what you try to provide here. So there's a video just of a Porsche project we won last year, so we can see if it works. scary music. So
Yeah. We're all paying attention now. All right, gentlemen. Well, thank you very much. You touch on many different aspects of connected cars, and I would like to somehow unravel it all and get to all of them. I couldn't help but think your video with the scary music and the delivery of the package was, reflected in the Bosch video with the very happy music. But it's the same process, the same procedure. So why don't we begin by talking about features? You're studying the connected car business for a long time. What are the features that consumers are going to be demanding moving forward? So who would like to tackle perhaps the management consultancy?
Yes. So first of all, just as in our video, I think that one answer does not fit all, right? The first thing that we clearly learned out of our clinics is that everyone will want to expand their life experiences in the car, even more with autonomous vehicles or in ride-sharing, car-sharing type of modes. Therefore, the flexibility of the in-vehicle experience is going to be crucial to be able to capture a broad array of customers. It's interesting when we have dig deeper in what would people do in autonomous connected vehicles. The first answer, particularly in North America, was rest, sleep, take a break, right? Not being stressed, not being bombarded by messages or by stimuli. That was number one. Number two is related to enjoying their connected life, which is a combination of social media, browsing, reading, enjoying media contents of all sorts. A specific type of commuters would want to expand their working life in the vehicle, therefore having easy access to their emails, to their platforms, being able to securely have private conversations is something that they will want. And on top of all these activities, there are some fundamental enablers. So consumers will just expect the car not to break down. They will just expect to find parking easily. They would just expect to find recharging spots available, right? So there is a set of enablers and a set of things that customers will want to do. Both require deep understanding of customer needs and their willingness to pay, which is probably something that many companies struggled with in the very first era of connected cars, right? They were launching a lot of features expecting customers to be willing to pay for. In reality, there was a free alternative that they were choosing instead. So I think that identifying these use cases specifically for each type of customer, and then making sure that customers are willing to pay for and how they will want to pay for is going to be critical.
We'll get to the business models in a moment, but first I would just like to hear from Bosch. Marco, what are the connectivity features then that Bosch is focusing on, and how do they relate to e-mobility?
Okay, let me first, with things we're already doing today that are out there and you can use them. And I will, as I already stated in my introduction, not totally relate them to only one car, but also to this connecting carriers of mobility to a system of transportation. First is, does anybody of you know Coop?
Yes.
Coop, did you use it?
I use Emmy.
Oh, do you have positive experiences?
I use the other one, it's Emmy, the orange one. Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, because Coop, C-O-U-P, is the e-scooter sharing offered by Bosch, which means that when I said we have to be more active in supporting this change and supporting in the establishment of intermodal transport, we already take action, and especially in Berlin and some other cities are coming now. I think Paris can be announced or was announced. You can do street scooter sharing, e-scooter sharing, which is for me, a very nice experience to do so. So that's something where we are already active, which is outside the car, a new offer we already have. And then more related to the car, community-based parking. You just said everybody expects to find a parking spot. But how do you do that? And we just use the sensors on your car, they're ultrasonic sensors, and while you drive by, they sense whether there is an empty space besides you, maps that with a map. Mapping with a map is an interesting term, by the way, and tells you that it tells the system that there's a free parking spot, and others that are looking for a parking spot can find it. So just 2 examples of features or offerings that are already available. Now, if we look more into e-mobility, I mean, nobody wants to charge a car, just like nobody wants to go to a fuel station and pick up fuel for the car. It's just a necessity, something you need to do. Fuel stations, you know, now offer shops, have an additional offering to make that more of a positive experience. And the same will happen to charging. So just offering charging services will not be enough. And still we have a certain range anxiety. People are not sure, do I reach the goal? Do I reach my target destination? Where do I need to charge? How does that relate to my schedule? How do I organize that? And we're working on a demonstrator that will be presented at the CES next January in Las Vegas, where we'll put all that into a range assistant with what we call an intelligent route planner, which means depending on the road conditions, depending on the state of your car, taking into account your personal preferences, like, do I like Starbucks or not? Where do I want to go to spend my time, and so on. So to your personal settings, but also the usage you already had in the past using AI. This will guide you with a very personal, but also taking into account the car technology with a very personal range assistant. So that is something that is more than a feature, I would say, but a real offering that really takes your, let's say, pain in the ass of I have to change my car into a hopefully positive travel experience with e-mobility. That would be one example. Another example is we use our in-car knowledge, our very deep system know-how, and the knowledge we already have in some years of offering charging services to offer end-to-end solutions for existing car OEMs. They don't use it because they are more experienced than others, but also for new car OEMs. And there's one company in Düsseldorf that just came out with a nice little EV beginning of this year, and there we have our technology in. So that are 2, I would say, more than features we are currently offering. But I want to go back on the feature side. You just, in your movie, we have the example of the car is not personalized by a key, but other people can use it. That comes from the thinking that a car is just one carrier of mobility and one part where I spend parts of my life. So here we do not only see the integration of cars with other carriers of mobility, we see the integration of cars with other areas of life, domains of life. You already mentioned that. And that is where we have to come from regarding our thinking. That is why we need perfectly keyless as a standard. So that's what we call it. Perfectly keyless has to be a standard in a secure way. So that's a feature we definitely need as well.
Well, then why don't you talk a little bit more about this collaboration that your startup had with Porsche. You mentioned, or the film mentioned, that this is the very first time that blockchain is being used for a car. Can you tell us about the applications that are being tested, and is this going to be sort of something for other car companies to follow with?
Yeah, the interesting thing is when you talk about blockchain, it's a decentralized database system, and it's pretty much a protocol. And the thing is, the basic protocol of blockchain is not really suited for IoT devices and even for vehicles, because it can be offline, it can be on and off, etc. So we made it happen by changing this, because we have hardcore scientists in the team. So we achieved it with Porsche, and what's raised after a while, it's that the main thing in this is really what you just mentioned before. It's we have to see it more like a network. I mean, the car is just one of these. It's maybe one of the main hub in this, but you have many things around. So we're developing also embedded clients with the same protocol that you can, for example, communicate directly with the charging station and with other things on the same protocol. So this is just super broad. Everything you mentioned here is included in this, and our concern here is, again, it's just that everything gets seamless. And I think the biggest challenge for the OEMs and the automotive sector is really that until now you have so many different brands. Everyone tried since years before to make different standards, etc. And nobody dares to make one standard because they know that the other one will not apply this, and this business model will never work and will never start because for the adoption, you need the user, as you said, they want something which is easy. They don't want something where they have to handle 5 apps for different services, etc. And so blockchain is maybe one of the solutions. We don't say this for making our own publicity, where our foundation is going to be open source, etc. But this is maybe the only way to go to this. This is why we are contacted by Bosch, by automotive. But we are contacted for the energy provider also, because they have exactly the same problematic, and all the others also. So this is where we are standing. So I cannot really tell you what is the best features and where we are going there, but this is quite broad for us. Yeah.
All right, well, I have to say, watching these sorts of, examples or visions of the future, and, I allow someone else to unlock my car with a message from my mobile phone. I mean, just as a consumer, my concern is whether all of this data being moved around and shifted and sent from, one place to another is going to be secure. Okay, blockchain is supposed to be very secure, but how do you reassure consumers that all of these features are safe and that their data will be protected?
Because the protocol is driven to the user. The user has a full control of the data and what is going on there. You can compare this. I just tried to make it simple. When you have you want to open an account on something new and you want to use your Facebook account for this, then you choose by Facebook what kind of data you want to deliver to this new account, like just the email or maybe just your name. And you have a control of this. But the main problem, of course, is what is Facebook doing with this data? We recently saw the problem with this. And blockchain is pretty much solving this problem because you are pretty sure, you are absolutely sure, so you have only one version of this data and you have control of this. You're the only one of this.
And what about hackers? I mean, how do we protect against people who are in parallel as all of these amazing connectivity services and technologies are being developed? There aren't, others who are busily working away at how to crack all of these things. How is Bosch addressing these risks?
First is you have to design security from the very beginning. And then that's a challenge, because if you talk about you have ecosystems, open networks, that's always a thing you have to really spend some thoughts on and some calories on. How do you do the architecture right from the beginning? And here we talk from hardware, from microcontrollers that run somewhere, all the stream down to data being exchanged into the back ends and so on. So there are lots of pieces in this chain that have to be considered, which is something we think this has to prove, because we are active in that many fields, that we really can provide secure end-to-end solutions there. We even have one branch in a company called eScript that only concentrates on securing end-to-end solutions in the IoT space, including the connected mobility there. So the first thing is you have to really think that from the very beginning and not come at the end and say, well, now we have to look on the security topics there. The second is you have to be aware that there is no 100% secure solution out there. So you also have to spend from the very beginning lots of money, thoughts, and calories, and even activate others, and many do that, to do penetration tests and so on from the outside, not only the inside world. And knowing that there is no 100% secure solution, you have to be very careful which data is where and which damage can occur when there's a leakage at what point. So how to do that in a modular way, not allowing entrance if one little wall is entered, that's the next thing. That also relates back to the architectural thing. So it took the whole community some time to realize that there is more to it than just connecting things, that they also have to deal with that. But I think there's lots of activity taken now. And I also like that there's more awareness now. I have to thank Cambridge Analytica. At one point, I'm very glad that happened, because now that created, let's say, a sense of urgency, not only in the public, which is very important. Everybody of us has to think what we allow others to do with our data. That's very, very important. It also created a sense of urgency on sea level, that we have to be very careful what to do there. Having said that, I come back to what Dario said. We still have to be data companies. So now what I realize is very often that people say, we can't do anything with data. Data is, we are close to hell if we even touch data. No, but we have to know what we're doing with it. So having more calories spent on identifying which kind of data we want to use in which way, letting people know what we do with that data, and doing that in the best secure way we can think of. That is what we need to do. And not, from data is great, data is bad, data is great, data is bad. So that's what I hope we do in the future.
All right, so there's the issue of data security, but without even having to be so dramatic about data being misused, there's also the question of data ownership. So I know that personal data gets recorded by the car, it gets sent to the manufacturer, but then what? So who owns this data? Who should be allowed to have access to it? And what is okay to do with it? How do we decide, the rules for what these manufacturers can do with that data? And maybe that's a question for McKinsey. So,
yes,
Michele, what would you say about that?
I think that data is a very peculiar type of asset, right? Because it doesn't have exclusive rights, and when it's in its raw form, data is a flow. It acquires from a legal standpoint. You need to classify, you need to put it in a database form, you need to enrich it in order for you to be entitled to essentially claim legal rights on it. And there is a lot of discussion and a lot of back and forth between regulators and associations of manufacturers, of suppliers, of independent aftermarket players, trying to define to what extent the data coming from connected cars will be open. It's an ongoing discussion. What we can say for sure is that, first of all, the landscape is not the same across the world as the topic of data ownership is tackled, for example, in China in a very different way. And somehow it's interesting because even when you ask consumers, how concerned are you about your data privacy? They say, no, we know for sure they're looking at our data. Right? They give it for granted that somehow their data is going to be used. What I believe is interesting is that consistently across North America, Europe, and China, consumers expect clear benefits in exchange for their data, right? And it's really, there is this general sense among our clients and industry players that whatever is being done is effective in conveying the benefits, so that people essentially feel that they give up their data for something back. Well, reality is that consumers don't always perceive that, don't always understand what are the benefits of some of the apps, maybe because they're too complex to use, maybe because no one ever told them how to. So from a consumer standpoint, of course, security is fundamental. It's almost given for granted, but there is also the other side of the coin, making sure that consumers perceive the full benefit from giving up their data. And there is still a lot of room for improvement for car manufacturers and for industry players to make sure that consumers understand what is being offered, to make sure that consumers enjoy the experience, making sure that it's simple enough, and to make sure that people feel reassured whenever these security breaches occur in any part of our digital life, to feel reassured that their data linked to the car is actually safe. So making sure that this works is a big, big pillar to ensure the acceleration of our ability to monetize car data. For the rest, the openness and the ownership of data is something that is being discussed and regulated extensively by authorities, and we will see this ecosystem shaping up in the next 5 years.
I mean, do you want to add something to that? I mean, your company focuses on cybersecurity. Like, how do you see all of these issues?
I mean, personally, I don't really have the same point of view. I mean, the ownership of data is someone's car who's authenticating, consuming services, and making transfer, on producing data, and many personal data is supposed to be his data. And there shouldn't be discussion around this. Of course, depending on where you are, you have different legislations, and of course, I agree with you, it's not the same rules everywhere. But I think the end user is really aware now about this. I mean, the last scandals we had with Facebook and other stuff just showed us that we realized suddenly that we were all naked on the web and doing stuff and spreading data everywhere without being completely conscious about what the companies were doing with this, and think this is really crucial now that this should stop and this should be regulated at least on a machine, on a protocol layer. So this is maybe the start of our mindset in the company, that this should be preserved, and we differentiate also personal data and of course data who are useful, for example the network, like geolocations, speed, and for the maintenance for the car and all the stuff, which is one data, but they can be anonymized, and they are guaranteed to be anonymized in these things, and we have to make sure that this is anonymized, but it's just useful. It's like, yeah, it's useful data for having a better experience with the car and having better performance, etc. But the personal data and everything which is related to this has to be hardly tackled. And I think it's the right time right now, because it's the start of this, and we're all thinking around this. And it's really important that we straight away having lessons learned from this and implementing the right thing in this sense, and starting from the right foot for this.
So as we said at the very beginning, this connected car industry, it's forcing through really a paradigm shift. We're thinking about things in a completely different way. And of course, that makes it impossible to do business as usual. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about new business models, especially for the OEMs. I mean, their business is making cars, but is that going to have to change? Are they all going to have to become service companies? Or what are the business models that are required to really make it in the connected car industry? So,
well,
would you like to tackle that
cool
first?
question to a tier 1 supplier, to ask him what the OEMs should do. Buy more from us. Apart from that, I mean, what do you see when you look at OEMs? Many of them, and if you look in Germany, we have all the brands of the Volkswagen Group, we have Daimler, we have BMW, and they're also all shareholders of Hubject. They would not define themselves as a manufacturer of carriers of mobility with 4 wheels and a steering wheel. Many of them would probably define them, but you have to ask them themselves, already as mobility service providers. And we had so many examples there. We had MyTaxi, we had Car2Go. Car2Go and Drive Now would now be a good example. And there are so many others, which I cannot mention. So there is already that movement going on. And everybody's trying out things, understanding where there are opportunities, but also understanding where there are no opportunities. So that leads me to the crucial point in there. We have to accept that with a high certainty, users will not pay for connectivity or for services enabled by connectivity. So the question is, where does the money come from in the system? And you see that also by some activities going on where some offerings already vanish from the market, because it's very hard to really make money in it. So we have to accept money will not come from the users. If the money does not come from the users to a large extent, where does it come from? So you can gain it from TCO optimization, from fleet operators, that you really, by using connectivity, can really show value of what you do, and you get the money from there. And or we have to accept that we have to get money in from others that enable the experience, the individual travel experience. And there, of course, the crucial point is that the door of entrance for all the Googles, Amazons, and all the others in there? And what do we, if we assume that is the potential entrance for them, what can we do to not allow them to do that? For business reasons, but also for the reasons we already discussed in data usage, in monopolistic things there. So that second part, coming from ads, from on-journey additional services, POE-related services, is very important. And we definitely need to think about how we can offer the users services there without allowing the big companies to get the whole cake, so that at least we have a share there. So that would be my general statement in there.
Michele, from a management consulting perspective, do you agree? Like, what kind of business models would be the most successful so that all stakeholders can benefit?
I totally agree, and this is a clear observation. Many of the players are trying to shift from manufacturers to mobility solutions providers. Not everyone will succeed in doing so. We do appreciate the size of the challenge. Still today, even the most progressive OEMs generate a disproportionate amount of their profit from their traditional business model. And when you look at the number of white-collar and blue-collar employees currently involved in what they call the mobility offerings, it's still a fraction. It's 5 to 10% maximum of the overall workforce. So not only there is this element of transitioning the offering, but even evolving and shifting a whole organization. And there is one reality. Making cars, yes, somehow might change going forward, but it's not going to get any easier. Cars of the future will have to be safer, will have to be less polluting, of course electrified, will have to be better cars than today. So the complexity and the safety and security implications of a vehicle will always be there. So the business model of a designer, manufacturer, and system integrator of a vehicle will still be there. Will it be enough to generate the profitability that has generated in the past 50 years? Probably not. This is why we see these new business models emerging in different ways. Some are taking multiple approaches at the same time. On one hand, trying to shift the big corporation, let's say, towards these new models, or seeding startups and leveraging their internal venture funds to stem innovation from the bottom. Some do both things at the same time. We see a lot of innovation around business models. We do believe that the business model of car manufacturers will still be there, probably slightly less profitable than it has been, at least for the next 10 years. So all these additional offerings and shift in mindset will be a way of ensuring a healthy profitability and maintaining customer relevance going forward. Because if the car really, as we heard from the previous speech, becomes a commodity, meaning if consumers will not really differentiate, maybe not in the premium or luxury segment, but in the mass segment, if they will not differentiate one brand from another, maybe they will choose on the basis of lowest cost or highest convenience of mobility solutions. The ability to be part of that ecosystem, either providing that service directly or being the brand of choice for the mobility provider that dominates that specific area, is going to set the bar of success for car manufacturers.
Right, so of course, your startup is an example of how a car maker is now cooperating with you, which is, of course, for your startup, fantastic publicity and opportunity. From a startup point of view, what kind of business models would you want to see develop?
I mean, we foresee, we're not economists, so we don't have the same expertise on the same point of view on everything there, but the thing is, we are not only on the automotive sector, we are in other sectors, related sectors and services, so we see the car like a really nice smartphone, but what is really important in the smartphone is the number of applications and services you can get out of them. So the smartphone in itself is completely dumb and useless if you have no services around them. So it's pretty much the same image we have, and the concern, of course, I think some are really starting this transformation, even big concerns like Daimler with Car2Go and other stuff. They make many labs around, and they're doing well in this sense. And I think I completely agree. This is completely the way it goes. But I think there's a really, it needs to be, but there's a really optimistic point of view for the moment. For example, for autonomous driving and things, I think the reality of implementing these things and make this real with a connected car, autonomous, driven by AI, etc., etc. It's very promising. It's a very nice dream. We're probably going to go there. But the way to go there, I think the industry has to transform itself in many ways, as you mentioned. Yeah.
All right, it's very warm here under these lights. All right, I'd like to thank all three of our panelists, Marco Lang for jumping in at such short notice, for your colleague Carolyn from Bosch, Michele Bertoncello from McKinsey, and Minh Cao from Xain. Thank you, gentlemen, for this really interesting discussion, and thanks to all of you for your questions.
Thank you.